Welcome back to Narrative Network. Imagine buying an old dusty doll from a street vendor, thinking it's just another harmless toy. But what if that doll had a dark secret? What if it whispered to you at night, promised to protect you, but at a deadly cost? This is the terrifying story of Adam, a 12-year-old boy who bought a doll that did more than just talk. It killed anyone who upset him. As the bodies pile up, Adam realizes that escaping the doll's sinister grasp might come with an unimaginable price. Stay with me until the end, because this is a story you won't believe, and one you'll never forget. The story begins with a 12-year-old Adam, who wasn't like the other kids at school. While most of them ran around in groups, laughing and shouting during lunch breaks, Adam would sit alone by the window, gazing out into the busy street, lost in thought. He wasn't lonely by choice, but after moving to a new town 6 months ago, making friends hadn't come easily. His father had passed away 2 years prior, and his mother, Sarah, was struggling to keep things together. Working long hours at a local diner, she barely had time to be there for Adam. Most nights, she would come home tired and silent, leaving Adam to his own world. As an only child, Adam found solace in stories, books, movies, and the fantasy world he created in his mind. His bedroom was a reflection of his imagination. Posters of superheroes, spaceships, and dragons covered the walls, but in one corner of the room, there was a small empty shelf, one that Adam had once filled with action figures from his father. After his dad's death, Adam couldn't bring himself to buy new toys, but he missed them. One rainy afternoon, while walking home from school, Adam took a different route through an alley he'd never seen before. There, nestled between two towering buildings, stood an old, dilapidated antique shop. A small hand-painted sign swayed in the wind. Oddities and trinkets. Everything has a story. Curiosity piqued. Adam hesitated. He had a few dollars from his allowance, saved up for something special, but he wasn't sure if this shop was it. Still, something about the place called to him. He opened the creaky door, and a bell chimed above his head. Inside, it smelled of dust and memories. The store was cluttered with all sorts of strange and fascinating objects. Clocks, paintings, broken musical instruments, and in the corner, a shelf filled with old ragged dolls. At first, none of them caught Adam's eye, until he spotted one at the very bottom. Its red hair was messy, and it wore a set of colorful clothes that looked like they had once belonged to a child. But the most striking feature was its glassy blue eyes, which seemed to follow Adam as he moved closer. "See something you like, young man?" A voice startled Adam. The shopkeeper, an old man with a crooked smile, appeared from behind the counter. "I'm just looking," Adam said, feeling shy. But his eyes kept drifting back to the doll. "Ah, that one." The old man's smile grew. "That's quite a special one. Found it at an estate sale years ago. No one's ever wanted it, until now." Adam felt a chill run down his spine, but he couldn't look away from the doll. There was something about it, something familiar, almost comforting. "How much?" Adam asked. "For you, just $5. The shopkeeper said, his voice soft and persuasive. Adam didn't hesitate. He handed over his money, and the old man wrapped the doll carefully in an old yellowing cloth. "Take good care of him," the shopkeeper warned as Adam left. "He's got more life in him than you think." Adam walked home quickly, his mind racing with excitement. He hadn't bought a toy in years, and the thought of having something, anything, to fill the emptiness in his room made him feel lighter. That night, after finishing his homework, Adam sat on his bed, unwrapping the doll. Up close, it was even stranger. The red hair was wild, the smile too wide, and those eyes, they seemed almost too real. But Adam ignored the odd feeling creeping up his spine. He placed the doll on the empty shelf, next to the few mementos he had of his father. "There you go," Adam whispered, almost as if he were talking to a new friend. He didn't expect a response, but as he turned to go to bed, he heard a faint whisper. "Thank you." Adam froze. His heart pounded in his chest. He whipped around, eyes wide, but the doll remained motionless on the shelf. Must have been my imagination, Adam thought, shaking his head. But sleep didn't come easily that night. The next morning, Adam awoke to an eerie silence. Usually, his mom would be banging around in the kitchen, but today the house was still. When Adam walked downstairs, he found his mother sitting at the table, her face pale and her hands trembling. "Mom, are you okay?" Adam asked. I had a dream," she whispered, her voice distant. "A terrible dream. Someone was watching me." Adam's skin crawled, but he said nothing. Instead, he grabbed his backpack and headed out the door, eager to get away from the strange atmosphere at home. School was no better. As always, the other kids ignored him, but today, one of the older boys, Jordan, decided to target him. Jordan shoved Adam into a locker, sneering, "Still playing with dolls, loser?" Adam's cheeks burned with embarrassment, but before he could respond, something strange happened. Jordan froze, his face going pale, and he stumbled backward, clutching his throat as if he couldn't breathe. The other kids screamed, and a teacher rushed over. Jordan was taken to the nurse, still gasping for air. Adam watched in shock, his mind spinning. He hadn't touched Jordan, hadn't done anything, but something, some force, had attacked him. When Adam got home that afternoon, the doll was sitting on his bed, not on the shelf where he had left it. Its blue eyes seemed to glow with a strange light, and Adam swore it was smiling wider than before. "What are you?" Adam whispered, backing away slowly. And then the doll spoke. "I protect you." At first, Adam was terrified. A talking doll, a doll that could hurt people. It seemed impossible. But as the days went on, Adam began to accept the doll's presence. The doll introduced itself as Charlie. It wasn't just a toy, it explained, but a guardian, sent to protect Adam from anyone who meant him harm. Though Adam was still scared, the idea of having something looking out for him was comforting. He'd been alone for so long. As time passed, Charlie began to show more of its abilities. It moved on its own, following Adam around the house. It whispered advice in Adam's ear, telling him how to handle the bullies at school, how to deal with his grief, how to make life easier. And at school, anyone who tried to hurt Adam found themselves in strange and painful accidents. Books falling on their heads, lockers slamming shut on their fingers, chairs tipping over at just the right moment. Adam didn't want to admit it, but he was starting to like the power Charlie gave him. He was no longer the helpless, lonely boy everyone ignored. He had a secret weapon, and no one could touch him. But soon, things began to spiral out of control. One afternoon, Adam overheard his teacher, Mrs. Rogers, talking to the principal about him. "I'm worried about that boy," she said. "He's been acting strange lately. I think he might need counseling." That evening, Adam told Charlie what he had heard, and the doll's glassy eyes flashed with anger. "She doesn't understand you. She wants to hurt you. I'll make sure she can't." "No," Adam protested, fear gripping his chest. "I don't want you to hurt her." But it was too late. The next morning, Mrs. Rogers was found in her classroom, her arm broken in 3 places after a mysterious fall. She took a leave of absence, and Adam's heart sank. Charlie was out of control. Adam tried to hide the doll after that. He stuffed it in his closet, buried it under blankets, even considered throwing it away. But no matter what he did, Charlie always found its way back to his room, sitting on his bed, staring at him with that unnerving smile. "I'm only doing what's best for you," Charlie would whisper. "I'll always protect you." The turning point came when Adam's mother started dating again. She met a man named Daniel, a kind-hearted man who wanted to help Adam and Sarah rebuild their lives. But Charlie didn't like Daniel. The doll's jealousy grew with every visit Daniel made to their house, and soon, Daniel began to experience the same strange accidents that had befallen Adam's enemies. It started small, a spilled drink, a door slamming in his face, but quickly escalated. One night, Daniel was driving home from their house when his brakes suddenly failed. His car crashed into a tree, and though he survived, he was hospitalized for weeks. Adam knew it was Charlie. The doll's obsession with protecting him had gone too far. It was no longer just targeting bullies. It was going after anyone who threatened Adam's fragile world, even those who wanted to help him. Adam couldn't take it anymore. He had to stop Charlie, but how? The doll was more powerful than he could have imagined. It seemed invincible. After the accident, Adam spent days locked in his room staring at the doll. "You have to stop," Adam whispered. "You're hurting people. I don't need protection like this." But Charlie only smiled. "You need me, Adam. Without me, you're alone. You'll be hurt again. They'll all leave you." Adam felt the weight of those words. Part of him wanted to believe Charlie, to keep the doll close and let it shield him from the world. But deep down, Adam knew that this wasn't right. He couldn't keep letting Charlie hurt the people he cared about. One night, when his mother was working late and the house was quiet, Adam made his decision. He grabbed a shovel from the garage and took Charlie into the backyard. The doll remained eerily still as Adam walked into the woods behind their house, its eyes glinting in the moonlight. "I'm sorry," Adam whispered as he dug a deep hole, "but I can't let you hurt anyone else." Charlie didn't fight. It remained silent as Adam placed it in the hole and began to cover it with dirt. Only when the last shovelful of earth hit the ground did Adam hear the doll's final whisper, "You'll regret this." In the days that followed, Adam felt a strange sense of relief. The house was quieter, calmer. Daniel recovered from his accident, and his mother grew closer to him. The strange accidents stopped, and for the first time in months, Adam began to feel like a normal kid again. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind rustled through the trees outside his window, Adam thought he could hear a faint whisper far off in the distance. He told himself it was nothing. Charlie was gone. He had buried it, and with it, the darkness that had plagued his life. But deep down, Adam knew that some things, some forces, never truly die. And as the moonlight shone on the quiet woods behind his house, the ground where he had buried the doll seemed to shift, just slightly. After burying the doll, Adam tried to move on with his life. He threw himself into school, making a real effort to engage with his classmates, something he hadn't done in a long time. With Daniel's recovery and his mother's growing happiness, Adam could feel the tension in his home beginning to lift. At first, everything seemed to be going well. He joined a group project for the first time in months and found himself slowly making friends with a boy named Ethan, who sat next to him in science class. Ethan wasn't popular, but he had a quirky sense of humor that Adam liked. They spent lunches together, sharing stories about their favorite comic books and movies. But even as things improved, Adam couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was wrong. It was the nights, especially, when he would wake up drenched in sweat, his heart pounding as if something unseen were watching him. He'd dream about Charlie, about those gleaming blue eyes staring up at him from beneath the dirt, waiting, planning. In the mornings, Adam would convince himself it was just his mind playing tricks on him. He'd buried the doll. It was gone. And yet, every time he walked past the woods behind his house, the weight of that decision bore down on him. He started to wonder if he had really put an end to Charlie's hold on him. Weeks passed. Adam's new friendship with Ethan grew, and for a time, life felt almost normal. But one day, as Adam and Ethan were walking home from school, something happened that would shake Adam to his core. They were crossing the street when Ira came speeding around the corner. It wasn't close enough to hit them, but the sudden screech of tires made Ethan jump back, narrowly missing a puddle of water. The The driver leaned out of his window, yelling curses at the boys, clearly irritated by their presence. "Watch where you're going, idiots!" the driver spat, his face red with anger. Ethan muttered something under his breath, but Adam couldn't tear his eyes away from the man's face. A chill ran through him, and suddenly, it was as if time slowed down. The air around them seemed heavier, darker, and Adam could swear that just for a second, he saw a flash of something red, something unmistakable. Out of the corner of his eye, the man's car jerked violently, as if something had yanked the wheel from his hands. The vehicle skidded out of control, slamming into a street lamp with a sickening crash. Glass shattered, and the sound of twisting metal filled the air. Ethan turned pale. "Did you see that?" he whispered, his voice shaking. "It was like something just pulled his car off the road." Adam's heart raced. He looked around, his pulse hammering in his ears. It couldn't be. He had buried the doll. It couldn't be Charlie. Could it? Trying to calm himself, Adam forced a smile. "Yeah, weird, huh? Just an accident." But deep down, he knew there was no such thing as just an accident anymore. That night, Adam couldn't sleep. His mind raced with the image of the car spinning out of control and that red flash he had seen. He hadn't told Ethan what he was really thinking, that it was Charlie, that somehow the doll had come back, even though he had buried it deep in the woods. When he finally drifted off, the nightmares came back, worse than ever. He was running through the forest, the trees closing in on him. Every branch seemed to be reaching out, trying to pull him back, and behind him, he could hear the soft, chilling whispers of Charlie. "You need me, Adam. You'll never be safe without me. They'll hurt you, just like before." The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and Adam's heart pounded in his chest. He turned a corner in the forest, and there, standing in front of him, was Charlie. Its red hair matted with dirt, its glassy blue eyes glowing in the darkness. "Come back to me," Charlie whispered. "I'll protect you." Adam woke with a start, his sheets drenched in sweat. His room was dark and quiet, but that didn't comfort him. The air felt heavy, almost oppressive, and in the silence, Adam swore he could still hear Charlie's voice echoing in his mind. The next day at school, Adam was a wreck. He couldn't focus, couldn't think straight, and every time someone raised their voice or laughed too loudly, his stomach twisted with fear. What if Charlie came back? What if the doll wasn't finished with him yet? He didn't know how to explain any of it to Ethan. How could he? Who would believe him? It wasn't long before Adam's worst fears were confirmed. One evening, as he was walking home from Ethan's house, he heard something rustling in the woods. At first, he thought it was just an animal, but the sound was too deliberate, too close. He turned, his heart pounding in his chest. The woods were dark, the trees casting long shadows in the fading light, but in the distance, he saw something that made his blood run cold. It was a small figure moving through the trees with unsettling speed and precision. The red hair, the wide grin, it was Charlie. Adam froze, his feet rooted to the ground. How was this possible? He had buried the doll. He had gotten rid of it. But there it was, moving toward him, its eyes locked on his. "No," Adam whispered, shaking his head. "This can't be real. You're gone. I buried you." Charlie stopped at the edge of the woods, its blue eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. "You can't get rid of me, Adam," the doll whispered, its voice low and menacing. "You need me. You'll always need me." Adam's heart raced. He wanted to run, but he couldn't move. Fear had paralyzed him. "I don't need you," Adam shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "You're hurting people. You're not protecting me. You're ruining my life." Charlie's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. "I only hurt the ones who deserve it. They don't understand you like I do. They never will." Tears filled Adam's eyes. He didn't know what to do. The doll was right. He had been scared, lonely, and Charlie had made him feel powerful, made him feel safe. But that power had come at a cost he wasn't willing to pay anymore. "I don't want you," Adam whispered, his voice trembling. "I don't want any of this." Charlie's expression darkened, the glowing eyes narrowing. "You'll regret this, Adam. You'll see. They'll hurt you, and when they do, I won't be there to stop them." And with that, the doll disappeared back into the shadows, leaving Adam standing alone in the middle of the street, his heart pounding in his chest. Adam knew he had to finish what he started. Burying Charlie hadn't been enough. The doll was too powerful, too connected to him. He had to destroy it, once and for all. The next morning, Adam skipped school and headed into town. He walked for miles, looking for a place, any place, that could help him get rid of the doll. After hours of searching, he found it. An old, run-down pawn shop with a sign that read, "We deal in the strange and unwanted." Inside, the shop was dimly lit, filled with odd objects and strange trinkets. At the counter stood an old woman, her gray hair pulled back in a bun, and her eyes sharp and calculating. "What can I do for you, boy?" she asked, her voice raspy. Adam hesitated for a moment, then reached into his backpack and pulled out the doll. Charlie's glassy eyes seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, and the woman's expression shifted. "I need to get rid of this," Adam said, his voice low. "For good." The woman studied the doll for a moment, her eyes narrowing. "This is no ordinary doll," she muttered. "It's bound to you. You can't just throw it away." "I know," Adam whispered. "But I don't want it anymore. It's dangerous." The woman nodded slowly. "There's only one way to destroy something like this," she said. "You have to break the bond, sever the connection." Adam's heart raced. "How do I do that?" The woman's eyes gleamed with something dark and knowing. "You have to face it," she said. "Confront it head on. It won't be easy. The doll will fight back, but if you can resist its pull, you'll be free." Adam swallowed hard. He knew what he had to do, but the thought of facing Charlie again, of standing up to the doll that had protected him, that had been his only friend, filled him with dread. But he couldn't live like this anymore. He couldn't let the doll control him. That night, Adam returned to the woods where he had buried Charlie. The wind howled through the trees, and the air was thick with tension. He stood at the edge of the hole, his heart pounding in his chest. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," Adam whispered, his voice shaking. For a long moment, nothing happened. The woods were silent, the moon casting eerie shadows across the ground. But then, slowly, the ground began to shift. The dirt stirred, and Charlie's small and dirty hand broke through the surface, its glassy eyes glowing with malice. "You'll regret this, Adam," the doll whispered, its voice cold and venomous. Adam stood his ground, his fists clenched. "No, I won't. I don't need you." And with those words, Adam felt something shift inside him. The fear, the loneliness. It all seemed to melt away, replaced by a sense of strength and resolve. Charlie's eyes narrowed, but the doll didn't move. It couldn't. Adam had broken the bond. With one final look, Adam turned and walked away, leaving the doll behind. As he stepped out of the woods, the weight lifted from his chest. He was free, finally free. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the faintest sound of laughter. But Adam didn't look back. He didn't need to.